Psychologists of Reddit. What's one thing a patient has told you that caught you off guard, or vice versa? Patient's perspective. My therapist once abruptly ended our session after telling me I needed to go to the ER. I had been in a car accident the day before and had an undiagnosed concussion that was pretty bad. I was so out of it I didn't even realize I was out of it. He later told me I was talking about inappropriate topics. I was so embarrassed I didn't ask what I specifically talked about. I didn't want to know at that point, and wasn't making much sense. I'm just glad he recognized I was off that day and helped me get to the hospital. When I was in first or second grade, the school counselor fell asleep when I was describing a bullying situation that I was in. I was so young that I didn't know how to respond, so I just sat there in his office until he woke up. I paid and sat through an entire session of therapy during which my therapist ranted as to how great of a career he could have had as a stand-up comedian and how much he regrets his current profession. I kinda agreed with him near the end. I had a therapist tell me when I was a teenager that she didn't know what else to do to help me because it seemed like I already understood everything pretty well. This was after my overbearing and crazy helicopter mom dragged me in for being depressed. Then she switched to therapy-ing my mom, and my mom quickly was in tears because she has the emotional strength of a child and wanted it to be about me when it was actually all about her. I knew exactly why I was depressed. I was stuck by myself in the middle of nowhere with her crazy ass. No personal space, no ability to get away, not being able to say no, her getting jealous of my friends when I spent time with them. It would make anyone depressed. She didn't even let me sit with the therapist by myself. Was talking to my school counselor about some mental health issues and told him that I like playing card games to take my mind off of it. The man literally opens his cabinet and pulls out a briefcase full of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I'm a massive nerd, and says, "Sue. Wanna play?" Don't get me wrong, but this guy had a lumberjack beard. Was fit and looked more like an athlete than a counselor, so I was shocked. Got over my problems and played every Wednesday against him. Edit. Thanks for my first award, kind stranger. Told mine I had seen him grabbing a drink at the same place I used to go get drunk before COVID. He stared at me like I had discovered something NASA was hitting. We had a laugh and he confessed it. Context: I had huge drinking problems and he told me he didn't like to drink at all. First time I saw a counselor. He was looking over my paperwork and said he could tell from my handwriting that I was good in bed. I kid you not. I was so caught off guard, all I could say was, I think I am. So young and not assertive at all. Found out he got in trouble for an inappropriate relationship with a client. But it really screwed me up for a bit, him saying that, because I have problems setting boundaries with men. I did most of my training in a pediatric hospital. One of my patients, young adult, with relapsing leukemia, cancer since young childhood, wanted to go to an outdoor festival with their significant other. The oncologists were adamant that due to the patient's low white blood count and current course of treatment, they shouldn't let them go. Basically, if that person caught an infection it would kill them. The patient was pissed, understandably so, and said something like, "I've had this disease since I was a child. I know I'm going to die soon. I'm going to the concert whether you like it or not, and if I die, then at least I'll do it on my own terms." It's always quite moving when a young person expresses their own mortality and confronts it head-on. I had such admiration for that person. I was in my second ever session, which coincidentally was right after my nan's funeral. I was talking about some stuff that had happened with my sister, who I had already said was probably my biggest issue, and he asked, "Why is this person in your life? Why do you want to continue a relationship that hurts you so much? Do you actually want this relationship?" I was floored. It had never occurred to me that my sister didn't get a place in my life by default because family. I can't tell you how much this improved my life. My therapist and I would end every appointment with a discussion of the latest Game of Thrones while it was airing. A great way to end things. Even the shitty end of the show got plenty of light-hearted ribbing. It was great BC, it wasn't too personal, and after talking about sex abuse for an hour I could leave without being such a sad sack. I'm a clinical psychologist working on the back end of my postdoc. I work predominantly with acute adolescent presentations such as chronic self-injury or sexual trauma. I'm so used to the young people I help hating themselves. It hurts a lot inside. But I firmly believe in catharsis through positive regard and validation. So as we do our therapy, I often sprinkle in comments here and there about some of the things about them that I admire, respect, or appreciate. Things like their perseverance, their kindness, or their passion for an interest of theirs. I'm always so caught off guard when they agree with me or say something nice about themselves that it's really the only time I find myself slightly tearful in session. I'm always so damn proud of them, and it hurts to hear the depths of their self-hatred. Those little moments of growth make me feel like it's the first warm day after winter. During my first and only session with a particularly memorable child psychologist, he referred to me as a miserable bitch. It was true, but he didn't have to call me out like that. I had one tell me I needed to learn to bite the bullet, which turned out to be good advice, even if it was blunt. Edit, I wasn't there because I was suicidal or anything. I was there because my mom and I had a pretty volatile relationship. She had some emotional issues where she'd just lash out at me over things that didn't make sense. And if I needed to learn to stick it out until she got better. Which she eventually did. And we have a much better relationship. Really paid off. It's beautiful. Had a therapist tell me to make a fuck budget. Hear me out lol. He said you only have so many fucks to give before you blow. So just like with money, you need to budget it out. Start with things you have to give a fuck about. Kids, work, health, and then cross the things you dislike giving a fuck about. Like people's opinion of what you wear. Off the list, and don't give a fuck about that shit. This was an older gentleman who was cool but for the most part very well spoken and didn't cuss. Hearing him say I needed to stop spreading my fucks so far made me die of laughter and immediately feel better. To this day I still have a fuck budget that I do every month religiously, and it has taken so much stress off my shoulders. I'll never forget my first day of therapy. My therapist asked me if I had ever been abused as a child. I replied, no, I had a normal childhood. I had everything I needed: food, shelter. I mean, my mother slapped me and would tell me to kill myself. And my dad would drag me by the hair everywhere and pull my hair out. But no, nothing abusive or anything. There was at least 30 seconds of dead air between us as I watched her blink while trying to figure out how to respond to what I said. Eventually she put down her file, crossed her legs and said, "My dear, that is abuse." My world came crashing down all around me at that moment. For so many years I had buried my feelings about what they'd done so deeply that I'd managed to convince myself that what they'd done wasn't wrong. Less than a year later I was diagnosed with PTSD and panic disorder from the trauma. And I cut off all communication with my parents. She said, "You don't have to forgive someone. Especially when they were so cruel and are not sorry." Shocked the hell out of me, as any therapist before that tried to get me to forgive. But I can't. I live with it, and I don't think forgiving them would bring me any kind of peace. After 5 or 6 sessions I was about to schedule my next appointment when my therapist said she wouldn't continue seeing me because she should spend her time on patients who have real problems. I didn't see another therapist again for, like, 15 years. I had been suicidal every day for over a year. When I was 14/15, I started seeing my first therapist. After a few sessions she told me I was too happy to be in therapy and kicked me out. And it messed me up a lot lol. I've been told almost that same thing. I suffer from severe social anxiety but get me one-on-one. I compensate by being too eager and talkative. They always tell me I'm too upbeat for anxiety and depression. On the bright side, I did finally end up with a good one. I'm really messed up. Been hospitalized a lot. I go through moments of such intense delusions that I'm no longer myself. I was admitted once. After trying to get my veins out of my arm, thinking they were wires, the doctor that was assigned to me wasn't really expecting me to be so paranoid. While in the observation room, he was trying to talk to me and I blurted, "What's it like being a robot?" "Mr. Robot Man?" I said, "Man, kind of like, ma a a a a a a a a a a n u h," and he started laughing. He wasn't expecting it. I wasn't either. I laughed with him. He was such a nice East Indian man. And hearing anyone with the same accent makes me feel lighter somehow. The only thing that caught me off guard was when my client, after 3 weeks of acting more aloof than anyone I've ever met, admitted that he was only in therapy to get his mom off his back for having a hard time getting to sleep, which she thought meant severe anxiety. I spent the time in between speaking to my supervisor on how to touch on possible severe trauma. I felt like an idiot, but he kept coming back, so I imagine I was useful in some way. Went to a psychologist when I was probably 13. I had depression, anxiety, and an eating disorder, and they often manifested in bad panic attacks and anger. After seeing him a few times and telling him everything, he brought my parents into the room and proceeded to tell them that I was fine. I was just angry at my parents and seeking attention. I tried protesting and explaining myself, but he refused to listen and tried arguing with me. Needless to say, I never went back there and my parents took me to a new psychologist. It definitely fucked me up a lot. And even thinking about it makes me angry. At the beginning of the session we introduced ourselves and then I proceeded to talk about my increasingly difficult battle with depression. I got a little emotional, but after almost 3/4 of an hour he asked me if I remembered his name. For the life of me I couldn't, and it just totally baffled me, as I almost pride myself in being polite and remembering things like that. The session was very blunt and it was question after question. I was eventually asked about drugs and I hesitated and squeaked, "No." The stiff and serious atmosphere cracked at that moment as we both began to giggle. The woman had a serious face up until that point. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. See you next time.